The metallic corridors of the Dominion's edge echoed with the heavy footfalls of Commander Vashara's boots. Purple-tinged dust from the Kepler mining colony still clung to her dark armor, mixing with dried crimson that wasn't entirely her own. Her pale purple skin bore fresh scratches alongside older scars, and her dark curls hung loose from their usual tight braid, framing a face that had forgotten how to show anything but controlled fury. The mining revolt had been messy. 3 days of brutal enforcement, putting down workers who dared demand better conditions. Her superiors called it necessary. Vashara called it Tuesday. She pushed through the entrance to Engineering Bay 7, seeking only to have her damaged gauntlet repaired before filing her mission report. The bay hummed with the quiet efficiency of late-shift maintenance, most stations empty except for one figure hunched over a diagnostic console. The human didn't look up immediately, unusual, since most crew members either saluted or cowered when she entered a room. Kai Brennan, according to his uniform tag, continued his work with steady hands, dark hair falling across his forehead as he concentrated on the delicate circuitry before him. "Commander," he acknowledged without turning, voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "What brings you to my corner of organized chaos?" Vashara hesitated, caught off guard by his casual tone. She'd expected the usual nervous deference, the barely concealed fear that followed her reputation through 3 sectors. Instead, Kai finally looked up, brown eyes taking in her appearance with something that looked almost like concern. "Gauntlet malfunction," she managed, extending her left arm where sparks occasionally flickered from damaged servos. Kai nodded, setting aside his current project. As he approached, Bashara braced herself for the inevitable reaction, the slight flinch when people noticed her fangs, the way they looked at her scars like reading a violent history written in flesh. Instead, Kai gently took her armored hand, examining the damage with professional focus. His touch was careful, methodical, and entirely without judgment. "This'll take maybe 20 minutes, he said, already reaching for his tools. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added the words that would haunt her thoughts for days to come, "You look like you need rest, not more armor." The simple observation hit her like a physical blow, more stunning than any weapon she'd ever faced. 3 weeks passed before Vashara found another reason to visit Engineering Bay 7. A minor calibration issue with her rifle's targeting system, something she could have easily fixed herself, but somehow her feet carried her down those familiar corridors anyway. Kai looked up from his workstation with that same easy smile, as if her presence was perfectly natural. "Commander. Let me guess, the targeting matrix is running 0.2 seconds slow on target acquisition." Vashara blinked, surprised by his accuracy. "How did you?" "7th time this month someone's brought me that exact problem. Fleet's been cutting corners on maintenance cycles." He gestured to a nearby bench. "Coffee?" "Real stuff, not the synthesized sludge from the mess hall." She found herself nodding, watching as he moved with quiet efficiency around his workspace. The engineering bay felt different from the rest of the ship, warmer somehow, despite the industrial lighting. Tools were arranged with care, and she noticed small personal touches, a flowering plant somehow thriving under grow lights, sketches of engine schematics mixed with what looked like landscape drawings. "You're an artist," she observed, accepting the steaming mug he offered. Kai shrugged, settling into his work on her rifle. "Helps me think. My grandmother always said hands that create can better understand what they're fixing." He paused, glancing at her. "What helps you think, Commander?" The question was so unexpected, so genuinely curious, that Bashara nearly choked on her coffee. When was the last time someone had asked her about herself, not her mission efficiency or combat readiness, but her actual thoughts? "Combat meditation," she admitted slowly. "My people, we find clarity through controlled violence." "Sounds exhausting," Kai said without judgment, his hands never pausing in their work. "Always being ready for the next fight." Something in his tone made her study his profile more carefully. There were lines around his eyes, a careful set to his shoulders that spoke of someone who understood weight, different from hers, but weight nonetheless. You speak like someone who's carried burdens, she found herself saying. Kai's hand stilled for just a moment. Lost my homeworld in the Centauri conflict. Sometimes the things we survive change how we see everything else. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. But survival doesn't have to mean staying hard forever. That night, Bashara found herself walking past Engineering Bay 7 twice during her patrol rounds, drawn by the soft glow of light under the door and the knowledge that someone inside saw past her armor to something she'd almost forgotten existed. The emergency klaxons had been silent for 2 hours, but Bashara's hand still trembled slightly as she sat in the medical bay, waiting for the dermal regenerator to finish repairing the plasma burn across her shoulder. Another, minor enforcement action, that had turned into a 3-hour firefight. She should have returned to her quarters. Filed her report. Maintained the facade of invulnerability that her rank demanded. Instead, she found herself outside Engineering Bay 7 at 0300 hours, hesitating before the door like some nervous cadet. The bay was dimmer than usual, most systems powered down for the night cycle. But Kai was there, as she'd somehow known he would be, sitting on the floor beside his flowering plant, a cup of tea cooling beside him. Couldn't sleep either, he asked quietly, not seeming surprised by her appearance. Bashara's carefully constructed response died in her throat. The adrenaline crash was hitting her hard, and something about the gentle lighting in Kai's presence made her defenses feel suddenly, dangerously thin. My people don't believe in weakness, she said instead, settling onto the floor beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Showing vulnerability it's worse than death. It means you're unfit to protect the clan. Kai was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the soft light. What's weakness to them? Tears. Doubt. Caring about anything more than duty and honor. Her voice caught slightly. Needing someone else. And what do you think? His voice was barely above a whisper. The question broke something inside her chest. When was the last time her opinion had mattered to anyone? When had someone cared what she thought rather than simply what she could accomplish? I think, she whispered, that I'm tired of being afraid to feel. Kai's hand moved slowly, telegraphing his intention, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When his fingers touched her cheek, brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen, Bashara felt her carefully constructed world shift on its axis. You don't have to be afraid here, he murmured. The kiss was inevitable, gentle as starlight and devastating as gravitational collapse. His lips were warm against hers, patient and sweet, nothing like the aggressive dominance her culture associated with physical contact. When they broke apart, Bashara was trembling for entirely different reasons. Kai, she breathed, his name a prayer and a question. I know, he whispered, resting his forehead against hers. I know what this means. What we're risking. But neither of them pulled away. The storage compartment adjacent to Engineering Bay 7 had become their secret universe. During shift changes, when the corridors were busiest and their absence least likely to be noticed, they carved out stolen moments that felt like entire lifetimes. Bashara had never known tenderness could be its own form of strength. Kai's hands on her skin were reverent, tracing the lines of old scars not with pity or fascination, but with something approaching worship. When he kissed the raised tissue along her ribs, remnants of a training accident from her youth, she felt beautiful for the first time in her life. Tell me about these, he whispered against her throat, fingers dancing across a constellation of smaller marks on her shoulder. Ritual scarification, she breathed, arching into his touch. Each one represents a victory, a proof of worthiness. Her voice caught as his lips found a particularly sensitive spot. My people mark themselves to show they can endure pain without breaking. Kai pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes in the dim light of their hiding place. And what if I want to touch you in ways that don't involve pain at all? The question undid her completely. She pulled him down for a kiss that was desperate and hungry, pouring years of loneliness into the connection between their bodies. When he loved her, slow and patient and achingly thorough, she understood for the first time why humans wrote poetry about the stars. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with their uniforms scattered around them, Bashara felt something she'd never experienced: peace. Kai's fingers traced lazy patterns on her back, and she could feel his heartbeat gradually slowing beneath her cheek. "My grandmother used to say," he murmured into her hair, "that the strongest steel is forged in the gentlest flame. Burns longer, holds its edge better. Your grandmother sounds wise. She would have liked you." His arms tightened around her. Would have seen past all this warrior posturing to the woman underneath. Vishara closed her eyes, allowing herself to imagine a world where such acceptance was possible. Where she could be both strong and soft, feared and loved. The fantasy shattered 3 days later when Lieutenant Commander Thresh cornered her after a senior staff meeting, his reptilian features twisted with knowing malice. "Interesting how often you've been visiting the engineering decks lately, Commander," he hissed. "One might think you've developed specific maintenance needs." The threat was unmistakable. Thresh had always resented her rapid advancement, and discovery of her relationship with Kai would provide him with the perfect weapon to destroy her career, and possibly Kai's life. That night, she didn't visit Engineering Bay 7. Or the next night. Or the one after that. But she dreamed of gentle hands and whispered promises, and woke each morning feeling like she was slowly suffocating. The transfer orders came through on a Tuesday. Kai Brennan, Engineering Specialist 2nd Class, reassigned to the Outer Rim Patrol Vessel Endurance. Effective immediately. Vishara stared at the datapad in her quarters, feeling the walls close in around her. Thresh's handiwork, undoubtedly, subtle enough to avoid suspicion, devastating enough to tear her world apart. The Outer Rim assignment was practically a death sentence, those patrol ships lasting an average of 8 months before disappearing into the void. She could let him go. Stay silent, protect her career, maintain the facade of the perfect warrior. It would be the smart choice, the safe choice. The choice her people would respect. But sitting there in the sterile confines of her quarters, surrounded by commendations and duty citations that suddenly felt like prison bars, Bashara realized she'd rather die as herself than live as their weapon. She found Kai in his quarters, packing his few belongings with the same methodical care he brought to everything else. He looked up when she entered, and she saw her own heartbreak reflected in his eyes. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Transfer came through an hour ago." His hand stilled on the small flowering plant he'd been carefully wrapping. "I figured you. I didn't know." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I've been staying away because Thresh suspected, but I didn't know he'd." Her voice broke. Kai was across the room in 3 steps, pulling her into his arms as the tears she'd been fighting finally broke free. She buried her face against his shoulder, breathing in his scent, memorizing the feeling of safety his embrace provided. "Come with me," she whispered against his neck. "Vashara. I'm serious." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "I have enough accumulated leave time to disappear for months. We could find somewhere." "And then what?" His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. "You'd lose everything. Your rank, your purpose." "My purpose was keeping their wars efficient," she said fiercely. "My rank was built on fear and violence. What if I chose something else? What if I chose love instead?" Kai's eyes searched hers, and she saw the moment hope rekindled in their depths. "It would be dangerous. We'd be fugitives." "I've been dangerous my whole life," she said, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "But I've never been happy." 3 hours later, the transport Meridian logged 2 passengers boarding under civilian documentation: Caravas, agricultural consultant, and Kai Brennan, mechanical engineer. Security footage would later show a purple-skinned woman with her distinctive scars carefully concealed, walking hand in hand with a human man toward the docking bay. By the time anyone noticed Commander Vishara's absence, they were already 2 systems away, watching unfamiliar stars whirl overhead from the observation deck of a transport bound for the independent colonies. "No regrets?" Kai asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. Vishara smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in years. Only that it took me so long to choose. In the distance, stars burned with gentle fire, and she finally understood what her grandmother's wisdom had really meant. The strongest steel wasn't forged in violence, but in the courage to be vulnerable. And love, she was learning, was the gentlest flame of all.